"Don't expect a penny, Ethan. Your father chose me," my stepmother said before the reading of his $40 million estate. Then the family lawyer reached the final clause and struggled not to burst out laughing. The day my father's will was read, I sat in a quiet office, my heart racing. My father, Michael Harper, had built a fortune of $40 million, and with him gone, I believed I would at least have a piece of his legacy. But before the lawyer even opened the folder, my stepmother Vanessa leaned across the table with a smile that felt more like a knife. She whispered, "Don't expect a penny, Ethan. Your father and I talked about this. Everything is mine now." Her words struck me like a hammer. For years, Vanessa treated me as though I didn't belong, as if I was a guest in my own father's home. Now sitting there with my Uncle Robert beside me, she looked completely at ease, like victory was already hers. She crossed her legs, leaned back in her chair, and waited to watch me fall apart. I clenched my fists under the table, fighting to stay calm. I could see my mother Karen sitting a few chairs down, her jaw tight with anger. She had always protected me from Vanessa's cruelty, but there was nothing she could do here. This was the moment that would decide everything. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his voice steady as he began to read. My stepmother's smile grew wider with every sentence. She thought she had already won. But then he turned the page, cleared his throat, and spoke one line that wiped the smile off her face and gave me a reason to finally breathe. I never thought I would walk into a room where my father's life's work was going to be divided like items at an auction. That morning when I dressed in a black suit that felt too heavy for my shoulders, the grief was still raw. My father, Michael Harper, was gone. He had been a giant in my world, a man who built his fortune from nothing and never once let me forget the value of hard work. He didn't spoil me, but he made sure I knew I mattered. And yet as I sat in the quiet law office, where his will was to be read, I felt as if I was about to be erased. The office was old and dignified with polished wood walls and shelves of law books that smelled faintly of dust. Heavy curtains muted the sunlight, leaving the room in a kind of serious gloom. My Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, sat beside me. Robert was a man who always carried himself with quiet strength. He wasn't wealthy like Michael, but he had a way of making me feel grounded. When I was a boy, he would tell me stories of how Michael had built his first real estate deal by sheer persistence, knocking on doors until someone gave him a chance. Uncle Robert had always been proud of my father, and he reminded me often that I was cut from the same cloth. Across from us sat Vanessa, my stepmother. She was dressed in a black silk dress, her hair styled perfectly, not a strand out of place. But her face told a different story than grief. While I sat with my back tight against the chair, my fists pressed into my knees. Vanessa sat comfortably, her body angled slightly toward the lawyer, as if she were waiting for him to confirm what she already believed. Her lips carried a faint smile that did not belong in a room meant for mourning. I had lived with that look for years, the look that said she was in control and I was just an inconvenience. Vanessa entered my father's life when I was 15. My parents had divorced 2 years earlier, and my mother Karen had done everything she could to hold us together. She wasn't rich. She didn't have the kind of power Michael did, but she loved me fiercely. When Michael introduced Vanessa, I tried to be polite. She was younger than him, sharp and beautiful in a way that drew attention. At first, I hoped she might be someone I could get along with, but I quickly realized that she saw me as competition, as a reminder of the life my father had lived before her. She would cut me down with casual cruelty. If I came to visit on weekends, she would sneer at the clothes my mother bought me. "Your father works hard for his reputation, Ethan," she would say. "Try not to look like you don't belong." If I spoke up at dinner, she would roll her eyes and remind me that I was only a child, and if my father wasn't in the room, she sometimes leaned in and whispered things I'll never forget. "One day, it will all be mine. You'll see." At first, I brushed it off as jealousy or insecurity, but over the years, her words piled up like stones on my chest. I learned to keep quiet around her. My visits to my father's house became shorter, my conversations with him more strained. I loved him, but I hated the world she created around him. Still, there were moments that reminded me my father did care. He would pull me aside away from her sharp tongue and ask how I was doing in school. He pushed me to get good grades, to think about business, to never let anyone tell me I wasn't enough. "You have my blood in you, son," he once told me. "That's worth more than any insult." Those words stayed with me even when Vanessa tried to drown them out. Now, sitting in that law office, I wasn't sure which version of my father I was about to face. Was he the man who once told me I was strong and capable, or was he the husband who let his second wife control the room and dismiss me? My fear wasn't just about money. It was about whether my father had believed in me in the end, whether I mattered enough for him to leave me a piece of his legacy. My mother sat 2 seats down, her face drawn tight. She wasn't here for money either. She had no claim to my father's estate, and she knew it. She came because she refused to let me sit there alone. She had endured years of watching Vanessa belittle me, and now she watched with eyes sharp as glass, ready to defend me if the insult started again. The lawyer, a tall man named Daniel, cleared his throat and organized the papers before him. His voice was steady, professional, and without emotion. He explained that my father's will had been carefully written and updated just a few months before his passing. The words hung heavy in the air, every syllable echoing off the wood-paneled walls. Vanessa shifted in her chair, her smile widening as if she were already savoring her victory. I could feel her eyes flicking toward me, waiting for the moment when my face would break, when disappointment would crush me. She wanted to see me defeated. She wanted to erase me from my father's story once and for all. My Uncle Robert leaned closer, his voice low so only I could hear. "Patience, nephew," he said. "Your father was a man of principle. Remember that his words were a small anchor in the storm rising inside me." I sat straighter, staring at the lawyer, preparing myself for whatever was about to come. I had no control over the words he was about to read, no power to change what my father had written. All I could do was listen, hope, and hold myself together in the face of Vanessa's quiet, cruel triumph. In that moment, I realized this was not just the reading of a will. This was a test of everything my father had ever taught me about resilience, pride, and patience. It was not only about $40 million, it was about the weight of my name, the measure of my worth, and the final question of whether my father's love had survived Vanessa's poison. The moment the lawyer began reading, the room tightened like a noose. His voice was calm and deliberate, but every word felt like a hammer against my chest. He started with small allocations, donations to charities, and minor gifts to distant relatives. My mind was half there, half somewhere else, replaying my stepmother Vanessa's smirk, and the way she leaned back, like she was already queen of the empire my father had built. When Daniel read out that Vanessa was to receive control of certain household accounts and personal property, she exhaled slowly and tilted her chin upward. Her satisfaction was not subtle. She glanced at me, her lips curving into a faint smile as if to say, "See, it is all mine, just like I promised." I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I forced myself not to react. My mother's hand tightened over her purse. She did not speak, but her eyes cut toward Vanessa with enough fire to burn through the table. My Uncle Robert, steady as ever, sat upright, listening carefully, almost like he expected something Vanessa did not. The lawyer continued naming properties, accounts, and assets that seemed to fall Vanessa's way. Each one was like a small blade in my side. A vacation home in California gone. A vineyard my father bought a decade ago gone. Even his art collection, which I knew he cherished, placed in her name. The weight of Vanessa's confidence pressed against me harder with every line. She leaned forward slightly and whispered, not loud enough for the lawyer to hear, but loud enough for me. "You should have prepared yourself. You were never meant to be part of this. He wanted me to have it all." Her words stirred years of memory. The night she sneered at me across the dinner table. The morning she made me feel like I was visiting a stranger's home instead of my father's. The countless times she told me I was irrelevant. Sitting there hearing her whisper, I almost believed her. What if my father had let her win? What if, in the end, he forgot his own son? I clenched my jaw, fighting the sting in my chest. I had promised myself I would not let her see me break. My father had once told me, strength is not about shouting louder than the world. It is about standing when others expect you to fall. Those words echoed inside me, but they were growing faint against the crushing sound of Vanessa's triumph. The lawyer paused to flip through a stack of documents. Papers rustled, the sound filling the silence. I caught Vanessa's reflection in the polished wood of the table. Her smile was growing, her confidence radiating like heat. She believed the game was over. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. Before I continue, I want to remind everyone that this will was updated 3 months before Mr. Harper's passing. Every clause is legally binding and carries his final wishes. Vanessa's smile did not falter, but mine did. My father had made changes recently, and I had no idea what they were. Was it possible that he had truly shifted everything toward her? Was this his way of moving on from me, from my mother, from the family he left behind? Doubt wrapped around my chest like a chain. I turned my head slightly and caught my mother's eyes. She gave me a look that said, "No matter what happens, you are not alone." For a second, the pressure eased, but Vanessa would not let me breathe. She leaned in closer, her voice a snake's hiss. "Do you see now? He chose me. He trusted me, not you. You were just his practice family, and now it is my turn to carry his name." Her words cut deep, sharper than anything she had ever said before. My fists curled under the table. I wanted to shout at her, to tear her smile apart with every ounce of anger I had buried for years. But Uncle Robert placed his hand on my arm, firm and steady. His voice was a whisper low enough that only I could hear. "Hold yourself together, Ethan. Your father was not blind." Those words struck differently. My father was not blind. He saw through people better than anyone I had ever known. He had once told me that wealth reveals true character, that when money is on the line, you learn who someone really is. I wondered if this moment was exactly what he had prepared me for. Still, the minutes dragged like hours. Daniel's voice continued announcing allocations of stock portfolios, investment accounts, and corporate holdings. Vanessa's breathing grew lighter, almost like she was savoring the music of it. My chest grew heavier with every detail. It felt like being buried alive under the weight of my father's empire. Each asset, another shovel of dirt. Finally, Vanessa leaned back and spoke openly, her voice clear. "I told you, Ethan. Your father trusted me with everything. You should find peace in that. He knew you were not ready." My mother's face hardened, and for a moment I thought she might snap back at her, but she held her tongue. Uncle Robert kept his hand firm on my arm. I understood then why he had come. He knew Vanessa would twist the knife at every chance, and he knew I would need strength not to collapse. The conflict was no longer just about inheritance. It was about my father's final judgment of me, whether he believed in the son he raised or the woman who married him. And in that room with Vanessa's smug grin and the lawyer's steady voice, I felt myself teetering on the edge of despair. The lawyer shifted in his seat, eyes scanning the final page. He looked up, his face unreadable, and for the first time since the reading began. Vanessa's smile flickered. It was brief, but I caught it. A shadow of doubt crossed her face. I straightened in my chair, my heart pounding as the tension in the room sharpened like a blade. Something was about to happen, and for the first time since I walked into that office, I let myself hope. The air in the room had grown heavy, thick with silence between the lawyer's words. Every sentence that had already been read clung to me like chains, pulling me deeper into the fear that my father had truly left me nothing. Across the table, Vanessa's confidence poured off her like perfume, overwhelming and suffocating. She sat with her legs crossed, one hand resting delicately on the arm of the chair, her smile unbroken. She believed the game was won, but then the lawyer shifted, sliding a fresh page out of the folder. His expression changed ever so slightly, a tightening around the mouth, a subtle flick of the eyes toward me, before returning to the document. It was the smallest crack in the monotony, but it was enough to make me sit taller. Vanessa noticed too, and for the first time that morning her smile faltered. My chest tightened with a strange mix of dread and hope. I wanted to believe my father had not abandoned me, but years of Vanessa's words echoed in my mind. She had told me so many times that he trusted her, that I was forgotten, that I was irrelevant. I could hear her voice even now whispering that I did not matter. And yet, in that moment, I made a decision. I would not crumble under her gaze. Whether I received nothing or everything, I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. My father's last lesson to me had been about resilience. I remembered his exact words from a conversation years ago when I was struggling in school. "Ethan, the world will look for ways to humiliate you. Don't hand it to them. Stand tall even if you are standing with nothing." I uncrossed my arms, sat upright, and forced myself to hold my stepmother's gaze. Her smirk twitched when she realized I was no longer shrinking. For the first time that day, she looked at me with a trace of irritation, as if my refusal to collapse was an insult to her victory. Uncle Robert leaned closer and murmured, "That's it. Don't let her win before you've even heard the last word." His voice was low and calm, but firm enough to anchor me. The lawyer continued, reading, his voice steady. "To my wife, Vanessa Harper, I leave the household we shared along with a lifetime allowance of $160,000 annually to be distributed from the estate's trust." The words hit the table like a thunderclap. Vanessa's smile froze. She blinked, her hand tightening on the arm of the chair. She had been expecting numbers in the millions, not a yearly allowance smaller than a single month of my father's income. For a flicker of a moment, her mask cracked, and I saw something raw beneath it. Fear. She quickly composed herself, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but the damage was done. She no longer looked so certain. The lawyer paused briefly, allowing the weight of his words to settle, before turning to the next page. My pulse hammered in my ears. My mother's eyes lit with a sharp gleam, as if she knew what was about to come. Uncle Robert gave my shoulder a firm squeeze, almost like he had been expecting this outcome all along. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, sharp and brittle. "This cannot be right. My husband would never limit me to an allowance. He trusted me with everything." The lawyer did not flinch. "Mrs. Harper, I assure you, these are Mr. Harper's final instructions, signed and witnessed legally 3 months prior to his passing." Her jaw tightened, but she forced a laugh that sounded hollow. Of course. I am certain the bulk of the estate is still addressed to me. Michael always said he wanted me to be secure." I stayed quiet, though inside my chest burned. Her confidence was unraveling, and I could feel the shift in the air. For years, she had told me I was nothing, that she was everything. And now, with each word the lawyer read, her foundation was cracking. In that moment, I chose not to hide anymore. I leaned forward, my voice calm but clear. "Funny, Vanessa. I don't recall my father ever saying he built his empire for you. He built it for his family." Her head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "You think you know what he wanted," she spat. "You were a child when he made his decisions. You don't understand the man he became." I did not raise my voice. I met her glare head on and said, "I know the man who raised me, and he never turned his back on his son." The lawyer cleared his throat to continue, but in that exchange, something important had shifted. Vanessa was rattled, no longer untouchable. For years, she had thrived on my silence, my hesitation, my fear. By speaking, by refusing to bend, I had taken something back from her. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and prepared to read the final clause. My chest swelled with anticipation and dread all at once. I could feel that everything was building toward this moment, the decision my father had left behind. The judgment he had made, not just of Vanessa, but of me. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, the smugness drained from her face. She sat forward now, her hands clasped tightly together, her nails digging into her palms. She no longer looked like the woman who had walked into this room certain of her power. She looked like someone who feared losing everything. My mother's hand brushed against mine, a quiet reminder that she was still with me, no matter what happened. Uncle Robert gave me a slight nod, his lips pressing into the hint of a smile. He knew somehow He had always known my father would not leave me behind. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. Whether the next sentence confirmed Vanessa's smug prophecy or revealed something entirely different, I was ready to face it without fear. I would not be the boy Vanessa had spent years mocking. I would be the man my father raised, the man who could stand tall, even in the face of betrayal. The lawyer lifted his eyes, his voice firm as he began to read the final words of the will. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for the verdict that would decide everything. The room was silent as the lawyer looked down at the final page of the will. His fingers pressed lightly against the paper, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that pulled every eye toward him. I could hear nothing but the thudding of my heart. Vanessa sat stiffly, her confident posture gone, her hands now clenched tightly in her lap. The lawyer began to read. To my beloved wife, Vanessa Harper, I leave the comfort of our shared home and a lifetime allowance of $160,000 a year. This is to ensure she will never want for necessities or comforts. Vanessa's lips parted, her face blanching. She opened her mouth to protest, but the lawyer raised his voice just slightly, continuing without pause. The entirety of my estate, including all real estate holdings, business shares, investments, and assets, totaling $40 million, I leave in full and permanent ownership to my only son, Ethan Harper. The words struck the room like a thunderclap. For a second, the silence was total, heavy, and absolute. My breath caught in my chest. I had expected something, a small portion maybe, but not this, not everything. Vanessa's chair screeched as she lurched forward, her voice sharp and desperate. What? That cannot be right. There must be a mistake. The lawyer lowered the page, his eyes meeting hers with professional calm. Mrs. Harper, I can assure you this document was prepared with your husband's direct input, signed and witnessed 3 months before his passing. There is no mistake. Vanessa slammed her palm against the table. No, he promised me security. He told me I would be the one to carry on his legacy. You expect me to believe he gave all of it to this boy? She spat the word like it was venom. My mother sat straighter, her jaw set in quiet triumph, but she said nothing. Uncle Robert, however, leaned forward, his voice even, but edged with satisfaction. Michael was a man of clarity. Vanessa, if this is what he wrote, this is what he meant. He trusted his son. Vanessa turned her fury on me, her eyes blazing. You think you deserve this. You were barely around. You let him down more times than you can count. He told me things, Ethan. He said you were not ready. He said you lacked his discipline. I met her glare without flinching. For years I had let her words sink into me, but not now. Not after hearing my father's final judgment. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady. He may have doubted me at times, but in the end, he trusted me. That was his choice, not yours. Her hands trembled against the table. You manipulated him. That is the only explanation. He would never. Her voice broke off, the words choking in her throat. She turned back to the lawyer. Read it again. There must be some hidden clause, some condition. The lawyer cleared his throat. There are no conditions. The estate belongs entirely to Mr. Ethan Harper. Those were your husband's explicit instructions. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Vanessa's face collapsed, her mask of elegance shattering into raw panic. She pressed a hand to her forehead, shaking her head in disbelief. This cannot be happening. Inside me something shifted. For years I had lived under the shadow of her cruelty, doubting my worth, questioning whether my father saw me as anything more than a burden. But here in black and white, his faith in me was undeniable. It was not just money. It was his trust, his recognition, his final lesson. I looked at my uncle. His eyes shone with quiet pride. He gave me a small nod as if to say, "This is the man Michael raised." My mother placed a hand on mine, her grip strong. She whispered, "He believed in you all along." Vanessa's voice rose again, desperate and ragged. "I will challenge this. I will take it to court. You cannot just hand everything to him and leave me with scraps." The lawyer's expression remained calm. "You are entitled to pursue legal action. Mrs. Harper, but this will is airtight. Your husband was very deliberate in protecting his son's inheritance." Vanessa's fury twisted into something darker, her words spitting out like broken glass. "You think you won Ethan money will not make you strong. You will fail, and when you do, you will wish you had me to guide you." I stood then, no longer willing to sit in the chair that had bound me in silence. My voice cut through the tension clear and unwavering. "No, Vanessa, I do not need your guidance. My father believed in me, and that is more powerful than anything you could ever take away." Her face went pale, her lips trembling, but she had no reply. She slumped back into her chair, her fury collapsing into silence. The lawyer gathered the documents, his task complete. "That concludes the reading of the will." His words marked the end of more than just a legal process. They marked the end of Vanessa's reign over me, the end of her cruel whispers, the end of her power. As I stood in that room, the weight of $40 million resting on my shoulders, I realized the inheritance was not just about wealth, it was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I carried the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. "You were right about one thing. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you." Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine. But more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, all of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was the clarity. For years I had doubted myself because Vanessa told me I was unworthy. I carried her words like chains, believing her sneers and whispers meant my father secretly agreed with her. When he was alive, I never asked him outright because a part of me was too afraid of the answer. Now, I finally had it. He had not abandoned me. He had chosen me. As I walked down the steps of the law office, my mother was right behind me. She placed her hand on my arm, her grip steady. "Your father knew exactly who you were, Ethan. He was proud of you." Don't ever forget that her voice carried a mix of relief and quiet triumph. For years, she had watched Vanessa humiliate me. She had held her tongue, fought her battles in silence, and prayed that the truth would one day come to light. Today it had. Uncle Robert joined us at the curb, his weathered face breaking into a smile I had never seen from him before. "Your father never doubted you. He wanted you to prove yourself, and you did. Now you carry his name. Carry his. Carry it well." I nodded through the weight of his words pressed against me. $40 million was more than wealth. It was responsibility. My father had spent his life building brick by brick, deal by deal. Every decision he made was about more than money. It was about vision and grit. I knew that inheriting his estate meant more than having resources. It meant proving myself worthy of his trust. Vanessa stayed behind in the office. I could imagine her sitting there stunned and broken, her carefully crafted world collapsing around her. For years she believed she could control the narrative that my father's empire would fall into her lap. Instead, she had been given comfort and security, but not power. That distinction mattered, and it was deliberate. My father had seen through her ambition and chosen to protect me. That night when I returned home, I sat alone in my room for hours. The documents from the lawyer were stacked neatly on the desk. $40 million entire company's properties across the country. I should have felt powerful, but instead I felt humbled. My father had not given me these things to make me comfortable. He had left them as a challenge, a responsibility. I thought about the lessons he had taught me. The mornings he pushed me to get up early. The times he told me not to waste energy proving myself to people who wanted to see me fail. The quiet way he reminded me that his blood ran through my veins, and that meant something. Those lessons mattered more than any number written on a page. In the days that followed, I began to feel the shift. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called. Distant relatives congratulated me as if they had always believed in me. Some of them wanted favors, some wanted money, and some just wanted to attach themselves to what they thought was power. My father's warning came back to me. Wealth reveals character. He had been right. I saw people more clearly than I ever had before, but the most important realization was this. I no longer lived in Vanessa's shadow. For years she had defined how I saw myself. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered threat had dug into my self-worth. Now her power was gone, and with it, the lie that I was insignificant. When I visited my father's grave the following week, I stood in silence for a long time before speaking. You trusted me, Dad. I won't waste it. I'll honor what you built, and I'll make sure no one ever says your son wasn't strong enough. It wasn't just a promise to him, it was a promise to myself. The lesson I took from that day was simple but powerful. People will try to convince you that you are small, that you do not belong, that you cannot stand on your own. If you listen to them, you hand them your strength. But if you trust yourself, if you remember who you are and where you come from, no one can erase you. Vanessa thought she had already won. She thought she could rewrite my father's legacy and strip me of my place in his story. But in the end, the truth stood taller than her lies. My father believed in me. That belief is what I carry forward, more valuable than any number in a bank account. And that is why I smiled when the lawyer read that final sentence. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like the video so more people can see it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were in my place. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seed.